Hello, and welcome to another episode of Walk the Dog Cinema, where me and Roka are out and about. And today we are going to discuss The Howling. So I am finally going to share how I came to love horror movies and my whole experience with The Howling and how it's kind of shaped some of my life when it comes to my horror movie experience and becoming kind of the horror movie guy in high school, and how it shaped reading and novels and all that, and then share some thoughts on kind of the effects of Howling and what I think of the movie all these years later, from late 81, early 82. And I'll share that story too, because an interesting side note of trying to discover when it came on HBO, and basically AI has it wrong when it debuted. So hate to say it, but my memory on this movie is much sharper than the dates AI spit out. So interesting little side note there. But let's talk about The Howling. So The Howling, yeah, it was kind of my first horror movie. Like I said, it was either right around November-ish of 81 to between that and February of 82. I don't remember the exact dates. I know I was in second grade at the time, and you say, oh my gosh, really? Yes, sadly, I lost my mother at the ripe old age of, she was 30 in May 15th of 81. And, being just barely 7 years old and dealing with that, to say the least, was rough. But lived up in Running Springs, and I was not a real big movie guy yet. I mean, 7 years old. Actually, which I will get into whenever I do that. My first movie in the theater was actually Superman, the Christopher Reeve one, not Star Wars or anything like that. My Star Wars experience is actually Select TV, the special, or it may have been on, but it was a special purchase kind of thing. So that's how I got my Star Wars experience. So I was kind of playing with Star Wars figures before I ever saw the Star Wars movie, which is kind of interesting. But so sadly, my mom passed away, and living up there where my dad worked at Patton State Hospital down in San Bernardino. I was very much now a latchkey kid, going to the elementary, which is kind of cool, up in Running Springs. It's named after the principal that was there at the time, and deservedly so. He's an interesting principal, back in the day. But to say that I was kind of going through interesting times would be, to say the least. But prior to seeing The Howling, I basically was just an absolute scaredy cat with horror movies. The Amityville Horror, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Like, I heard my parents, watching them, or I was out there, but I'd be hiding my eyes, the music, closing my ear. I didn't make it through. So never really watched horror movies in any way, shape, or form in that regard. Hated them. I was more a TV guy, Mork and Mindy, The Muppets, things like that, right? But anyhow, had a friend second grade who was already a really good artist for the most part, and he would always draw like the classic monsters, Dracula, Wolfman, and all that. And he was drawing a picture of a werewolf, and I remember kind of asking him, like, oh, what's that? And he talked about this movie, The Howling. And I was, oh, wow, okay. And basically, I knew I'd be home alone, and I think it's just one of those things that internally I kind of wanted to challenge myself to get over my fears, being home alone. You're up in the woods, quite scary at times. I had a little sister that I'd watch here and there, pick up for maybe like a half hour before my dad got home from the babysitters if he was running late and things like that. Different times back in the early 80s. But the fact of the matter is I thought it was interesting, this monster, this werewolf. Like, I didn't really have a concept of a werewolf. Seemed intriguing, and he talked about the big transformation scene and the part where in the movie it ends up being Eddie, the serial killer werewolf dude, who transforms and tells this girl, Dee Wallace, that he's going to give him a piece of his mind. So it's kind of the iconic scene that the kid talked about, and I thought it sounded really cool. Like, oh wow, what's that? Like, didn't kind of know what special effects were. You're 7 years old, right? So he told me it was going to be on either, one of the movie channels, HBO, Cinemax, the movie channel. As a matter of fact, like, it's always on. So like, check it, because it should be on like today or whatever it was. So I know I went home, looked for it a little bit, found out it was going to be on, which was going to be on before my dad got home and before I had to pick my sister up if I was going to have to. So, and of course it was light outside still. So, more like duskish, but it was still light outside, and decided like I was going to challenge myself to not be afraid and get through this horror movie. And so that's my experience with The Howling. And of course I was completely engrossed. Somehow didn't look away, stood in this dark room, or living room. I mean, it was semi-dark, more duskish like, but it's very vivid, seeing the movie and seeing the werewolf transformations. And I remember, because I had to pick up after it all ended, you're just kind of like wide-eyed, like, what the heck did I just watch? But I realized, in terms of that, like, horror movies are about conquering your fears a little bit. And for me, it was kind of empowering. I sat through this movie and dealt with it, and yeah, it has nudity and all these crazy things, but to be honest, like, 7, like, I could care less. It was just cool werewolf transformation, seeing all these werewolves, and just like, it was kind of like mind-blowing. It's such a different universe and so creative. And this time I was already really highly creative, playing by myself if I did, which I had been doing for a lot of time. I mean, I had a lot of friends that I'd play, but you kind of like do back then, which would be kind of like LARPing now, but you'd be a boy and pretend that you're doing Clash of the Titans or doing these things, but also making up your own stories within those worlds. And I had my Star Wars figures and creating all new stories with them. And so I was already kind of a little bit of a writer at this time. It's kind of crazy to see some of the paperwork that some of my family saved when I was in like 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, and some of the stories I wrote. Pretty crazy, pretty wild out there stuff. It was very science fiction-y, which makes sense because, like I said, I was kind of into like Mork and Mindy, Great American Hero, mixed in with a little bit of Dukes of Hazzard and things like that, because I would watch Dukes of Hazzard. But for the, so it's kind of interesting in that aspect, right? So anyhow, making it through The Howling, and then getting a call, go pick up my sister. And I just kind of remember walking to pick her up at the babysitter. You're kind of like The Howling with the Colony, very woodsy. It was kind of cool. I remember because it was winter, so I had to put my jacket on and all that. And it felt very much like I was a part of the movie in an extended form, and you're kind of looking around. And, yes, there's houses and stuff, but still at the same time, like, it was very much a visual imprint of it all. So, fascinating in that regard. That's how I remember it. But overall, like, watching the movie last night, I probably hadn't seen it since I got it on DVD. It isn't a movie that I just like regularly remember watch, or and I dig it. But to be honest, American Werewolf in London for me is the better werewolf movie around, and it came out around the same time. Though I love the transformations in this one. Not necessarily a lot more, but they are more kind of monstrous, just within how the movies portray them in that sense. But what's crazy is Rick Baker, Rob Bottin were working together on The Howling. He left The Howling to go do American Werewolf, and Bottin stayed back, and they both got nominated, deservedly so. But the big thing with The Howling for me, watching it as an adult, yes, it's still it's a great werewolf movie. It's fun in a kind of interesting way, but the ending is still clunky as all heck for me. Them with the barn getting kind of pushed back. They're werewolves. What are they? There's just some incongruencies there where the guy with the silver bullets, Scott, he kind of pushes them back in, but there's multiple werewolves, and then they attack Dee Wallace and the newspaper guy, while they're in the police cruiser, and it's all kind of rather clunky. And Joe Dante has kind of a wilder style, and so obviously he was fashioning it because of the cool werewolf looks to capture him on screen, but it does come off clunky. And so I think for me, actually, besides the climax of the film where Dee Wallace kind of shows that there's werewolves out there, which is an iconic ending, that portion kind of is undermined by the great sequence where Eddie shows himself the first time transforming. I'm going to give you a piece of my mind, Karen. Very iconic things. You have the kind of sex scene that they turn into werewolves at the very end. There's like these iconic moments, but after all that, the movie's a little slight. It stays moving. It's a great entry point for werewolf movies, but there are better werewolf movies out there, and I still stand behind that. But that's my foray into horror. And the interesting thing with it is I wanted to check up just to kind of see when that would have been, so I could really pinpoint. And of course AI and the internet claims that it didn't premiere on HBO until late 82, which is a physical impossibility of November of 82, because I was no longer living up in Running Springs by then. I was down in West Covina going to Monte Vista Elementary School by then. And how did I know that? Because I was living with my grandparents by then, because we had moved right prior to the end of my second grade year, and which would have been right around May. So I stayed up a year in Running Springs from my mom's passing, and I saw the Howling up in the cabin, and there's no way my memory is shot from that. It's too ingrained. People, Mandela effect. No, this is the first horror movie that I ever stood through. I remember where I was standing in the living room, with everything that I was going through and dealing with, and I did not see the Howling later on down the line when I was in third grade, because by that time I had already seen American Werewolf in London over the summer of 82. And that's the other part I do know, is because, again, I saw American Werewolf in London after I saw the Howling. And it was the same summer I saw roughly, well, not same summer, but somewhere right around there, I saw First Blood. So American Werewolf and First Blood kind of like go together. That might have even been a little bit down the line from 82, maybe early 83, but that's how I place it. And you'd say, well, that's November 82, and then I know I saw the Howling up in Running Springs, and the November date might be right. Like I said, November, and it came out on VHS, according to that, in February. November and February is definite, like it is that time period. So it's kind of interesting that it's about a year off on AI. So it got it wrong. And yes, you can take it for what you want within someone's memory, but it's undeniable with mine, whether you want to believe it or not. That's up to you. I could care less, but the fact of the matter is that's my entry point into horror movies. Got into reading Stephen King, and and then watching other horror movies, like I said, and challenging myself within that, and really saw some really great stuff, saw some really bad stuff. The crazy thing is I never kind of let myself get desensitized to horror movies. I kind of like feeling the tension and getting a little scared, so I kind of try to always not think about not being scared or whatever. So I still, to this day, even after like watching The Howling last night, I can let myself feel the tension of parts and really kind of soak it in. So it led to watching the Friday the 13th, getting into Nightmare on Elm Streets and things like that. So yeah, that's The Howling. If you are not a person into horror movies, or you want to check out werewolf movies, I always go with an American Werewolf in London, but The Howling is a good one to see. Not so much the sequels, but or you want to explore Joe Dante's film career. Howling's always a good one. Piranha's a good one with Tim. Obviously, because of The Howling, he got to do Gremlins, which is fantastic, and that's really classic Joe Dante Gremlins. But Howling's a good entry point. Tell me what you think of The Howling, what your experiences are, how you came to horror movies, if you're into horror movies, and if you like the content, please subscribe. Have a good one, everybody.